Before we roll our sleeves up and get our hands dirty, let's take a minute to review the user interface. That way, we don't get lost in the sauce and we know where we're going before we get there. Let's get started. Starting with our homepage, we have basic but important information such as network connectivity, material type and volume currently loaded, current temperatures of both nozzles, and the current status of our printer. There is one thing I would like to note about the status bar. Right now, it's showing ready to print. However, if we have a firmware update available and or an error/warning message, this status bar will turn blue and let us know the cloud update is ready, or red to display an error message. Next, let us explore the main menu and the various submenus it has to offer. We can access the main menu via the hamburger button in the upper right hand corner. Our main menu is comprised of 6 submenus, starting in the upper left with bed level. This is a menu we've become very familiar with while using our desktop printer. We have 3 additional submenus under bed level. Starting on the left, we have one of the most important utilities, shim bed level. This is where we will navigate anytime we need to level our print bed. Next, we have adjust print bed Z offset. This utility is only used if we are having trouble getting enough travel from the printer's leveling screws to properly level the bed. This utility will reset the starting Z offset between the nozzle and the print bed. The last utility we have under our bed level menu is adjust fiber nozzle height. As the title suggests, this is where we will navigate whenever we need to properly set our fiber nozzle height. That wraps up the bed leveling options and brings us to our next submenu, materials. This menu is where we will navigate anytime we need to load both plastic and fiber materials. However, as you can see, we have a third option under the materials menu. That option is to reset either plastic or fiber meter. Eiger's estimate of remaining print material is deliberately conservative, so to improve the accuracy of material metering, you can reweigh your spool without unloading material by using the reset meters utility. That concludes our materials menu. Our next stop is the storage submenu. You can also navigate to this menu via the USB shortcut icon at the top of the home screen whenever a USB is actively plugged into the machine. Here we have a couple important utilities starting in the upper right with print from storage. If you're printing via USB instead of over the cloud, this is where you will find all the print jobs you have loaded onto the USB. Next, we have the reprint utility. This will allow us to quickly reprint the last print job that was sent to our printer. This avoids us having to reslice or reconfigure a build that we need to print multiple times, saving us valuable time. Next, we have the save logs utility. This is one of 2 locations where we can download the machine log files. These log files are very helpful when troubleshooting any issue with our machine. We will go over the second location during our Eiger training. The last utility in this submenu is print job history. This is a simple utility that allows us to quickly view the print job history of our machine. Now we begin our journey on the bottom row of the main menu. This is where things can get a little confusing with Inception style submenus within submenus. But let's start at the bottom left with utilities. Here we have 5 additional submenus and 1 diagnostic utility. Under manual control, we have 2 options, temperature control and actuate fiber cutter. Temperature control allows us to preheat or pre-cool our nozzles to help save time when our printer bandwidth is limited. Actuate fiber cutter allows us to manually actuate the fiber cutter servo. This is helpful when clearing a fiber jam or diagnosing a possible issue with the fiber cutter servo itself. Next, we have our maintenance menu. Here is where we will find all maintenance related utilities, starting in the upper left with replace nozzles. As the title suggests, this is where we will navigate anytime we need to change our nozzles. This utility is used for both plastic and fiber nozzles. Following our replace nozzles utility, we have our maintenance schedule. This is one of my favorite utilities because it tracks consumable usage. This includes trackers for both fiber and plastic nozzles, all fiber and plastic Bowden tubes, and even belt tension. This utility will let you know when it's time to replace these high-use consumables. Moving on to extruder maintenance. As the name suggests, this is where we would go if we need to troubleshoot any extrusion issues. There are two different options depending on the issue we are troubleshooting: extrusion flow check and under extrusion troubleshooting. And that brings us to our last utility under maintenance menu, firmware recovery. We would use this utility if we ever needed to recover corrupt firmware. And that wraps up our maintenance section and takes us to the printhead alignment menu. Here we have a single utility, fiber nozzle XY offsets. This utility would be used if we ever needed to replace the printhead and is designed to set the appropriate offsets for the fiber nozzle. After printhead alignment, we have our network diagnostics utility. This is an automatic diagnostic utility to help troubleshoot any network issues. The last option in the utilities submenu is our test prints menu. Under this section, we have 3 different test prints. Starting on the left with my personal favorite, bed level test print. This is a quick 7-minute test print that will give us visual feedback to help determine if the print bed is properly leveled. Next, we have our Onyx Pillars test print. The Onyx Pillars test print can be used to diagnose under extrusion as well as several other printing issues. This test print is also significantly more effective at diagnosing wet onyx than the plastic purge routine. Which brings us to our last test print, wet plastic purge print. The wet plastic purge routine is designed to purge any plastic from the print head and extruder that may have absorbed water from the air. Therefore, this routine purges your Bowden tubes of any potentially wet material to help ensure successful, high-quality prints. Moving on from the utility submenu, we have the print queue. This print queue allows us to view and manage multiple print jobs from the printer itself. We can navigate to our particular print job if we have multiple jobs stacked up, or simply print the current job that is loaded in the queue. This brings us to the home stretch of our UI overview, the settings submenu. Here we have 5 options to explore, starting in the upper left with Network Manager. Network Manager is a submenu that will allow us to configure and set custom network settings. Under the Network Settings menu, we can easily switch between a Wi-Fi or Ethernet connection. In addition to the Network Settings menu, the Network Manager menu also allows you to configure some advanced networking features such as setting a static IP address, customizing proxy configurations, and configuring custom DNS and NTP settings. After the Network Manager, we have the Update Manager. This is where we would navigate if we wanted to check for any firmware updates. However, I will say this utility is more useful if the printer is offline since most firmware updates are pushed via the cloud. Following the Update Manager, we have Security. This is where we would navigate if we ever needed to change the device access key. Each Markforged device uses an access key to authenticate its connection to Eiger. While the default device access key ordinarily suffices, you may need to change the device access key to meet heightened organization security requirements. That brings us to our last submenu, System Info. Under System Info, we have 5 different tabs we can navigate. The first tab is where we'll find important information such as machine ID, access key, and firmware. The next tab allows us to enable and disable 2 different key features, fiber jam detection and wet plastic purge. These should only be disabled during troubleshooting with a certified technician. The third tab hosts material information, printhead offsets, and extruder information. The fourth tab has our current network information, such as Wi-Fi or Ethernet MAC addresses and current IP addresses being used by our printer. And the fifth tab is where we can go to brag about how awesome and useful our printer has been. This tab has information such as total print time and total prints completed. The final tab will bring us back to the home screen and conclude our tour of the user interface. Now it's time to get our hands dirty and start configuring our hardware, starting with leveling our print bed.